right.
Oh my.
Welcome, welcome to our Christmas edition of Unbiased America Live. We're here with our regular panel. We're here with Mike Lee from We Are Capitalists, the purveyor of Being Liberal Logic. Now you're in We Are Capitalists right now, Mike.
Yeah, and BCL.
Okay. Also, the kid who just walked away at the exact time that I'm about to introduce him, Matt Palumbo from Unbiased America and Being Liberal. This is our Trump edition. How to get rich.
I got this like 4 years ago.
Kevin, I wish Kevin was here to see me with this hat, but this hat is classic. I mean, it is wonderful, and everyone's jealous right now. But seriously, I wanted to start off, and I didn't tell anybody about my prop before the show. We have absolutely 0 viewers right now, but I'm sure at a future date that people will watch this.
This is going to get screen capped, and the day you run for office someday, it's gonna come up, and they're gonna be like, he was a Trump supporter.
For sure. But I mean, I see a lot, and this is going to be a good topic, and the topic is what people I see numerous people on the left and right. And I mean, I don't know if it's just out of sheer stupidity, and I don't know, maybe you guys agree with it, that Trump is a fascist. And I want to talk about fascism and socialism. I did a post on this at Unbiased America, and I did it a long time ago, and I reposted it, and it got a ton of attention. This is after everybody's calling Donald Trump a fascist. If you want to use fascism and it's what it is in reality, Barack Obama is a fascist. Bernie Sanders is running on a clearly fascist platform. Donald Trump, if you look at his tax plan, is the least fascist amongst the Democratic field and among Democrats that are in office today. People will confuse nationalism and him saying that there's a moratorium on Muslim immigration to the country as fascism, meaning that nationalism is necessarily fascism. It can't separate national security from, say, a political ideology that restricts resources, that controls people through the restriction of resources. And Matt, I know that you did as much work on this as I did, and fascism seeks to control people through the allocation of resources, and this happened. And we can get into that, but just talk about how they control people through resource allocation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a step below socialism. It's you have private industry, but it's government extensively having control over it, and it gives government a kind of a hedge. If things go well, they can claim this is their policy. If things don't go well, they can blame it on private industry. And we're kind of seeing this with Obamacare, actually.
Exactly.
When United Health is pulling out of the exchanges, they can say, well, if it wasn't for United Health, everything would be going fine. When in fact, they're pulling out because the incentives they've created are shit. So.
Right.
And by the way, you were saying, Sanders is more of a fascist than a socialist. That's completely true. He's not a socialist, even though he says he is. I don't think there's any mean of production that he wants to nationalize. He just wants to take more stuff from people and give dollars. So.
Now, Mike, what Matt said, it's socialism. Peter Drucker did this comprehensive study on totalitarianism. He delved into socialism and fascism, and he said essentially, or communism too, which is communism using socialism as the means to allocate resources, which is government ownership. He said that fascism is the stage reached after socialism is discovered to be an illusion. And fascism is just another degree of that illusion, is giving people the illusion that they own things, that they own their resources, when through confiscatory tax policy and regulations, government actually controls your resources. And this has happened in Latin America with Getulio Vargas, with Juan Perón. You've seen it with Carlos Menem in Argentina to certain degrees, most definitely in Peru, Brazil, Lula, that was there for a while. These guys are all manipulating people through controlling the resources. And I did talk to Peter Schiff about this, actually, at Freedom Fest. If you could look that up on YouTube. We talked about corporatism and fascism as to how they allocate resources here. Do you see a fundamental difference today, Mike, between socialism and fascism? I mean, I think Friedman often said that socialism today is confused with fascism. He didn't directly say it, but he said people think that socialism today is government through taxes and regulations. Redistributing resources as opposed to controlling and owning the means of production. Go ahead.
Well, I think they get conflated, but I think there's actually, I wouldn't say it's logical. I get it's not irrational the reason people conflate it. Because when you have socialism, there is the opportunity for fascism. And I think that's why these things get conflated. I don't think they're the same thing necessarily, but when you have a central group or a central control of resources or government control
It's
controlling
planning.
means of productions, central planning, yeah, that can tip in that direction. I don't think it's necessarily the same thing, but I don't think it's irrational that they get conflated. I see why it happens.
No, I don't. No, I certainly don't see it as irrational that they get conflated. I see them as eerily similar things. One, fascism, just with the illusion that you actually own the resources that create the incentive of profits in the first place. You think, oh, I'm going to profit from this, but soon you realize that you're working, and then they're going to overly regulate you, burden you with barriers to entry. When you do have barriers to entry, they're going to cut into some of those profits by confiscatory taxes, limit that industry, and create this, actually lower the standard of living by misallocating resources in the same vein as socialism. They just realize that in reality, socialism there is no incentive for anyone to produce. That the government cannot live off of a socialist economy. That it's impossible. That they realize that fascism is more prudent to growing political power than socialism is. And I think that's what Mussolini understood. Certainly that's what Hitler understood. Most definitely that's what the fascists in Latin America molded their systems after. And I put up the similarities on UA, on Unbiased America, between socialism and fascism. And Matt, a lot of these differences were like, people saw it that, communism was international and that fascism was just national. But if you look at Mussolini, here's a guy that took over parts of Africa. He invaded Africa. You look at, obviously Hitler started to invade Poland, invaded Belgium, he invaded Russia. Go ahead.
I noticed the only rebuttal to that post you made was that Hitler didn't like unions, and unions are not liking unions is a conservative thing. Therefore, fascism is not left wing.
No, that was the thing was that unions were a threat to power, just as they are in socialism. Yeah. It was incorporating these unions into this. Oh, you don't need the unions. We have you have the state that will protect you with these laws and regulations, and that a private union or a union that can control or monopolize labor has too much power.
Even FDR was against the public sector ones, so.
Oh yeah, and rightfully so. Here they're robbing from, you don't have to take that job if you don't want. If they don't offer enough, don't take it. These are people fighting against market mechanisms and coming at the expense of other people. I really hate that. Just as a corporation would be doing the same if they were accepting accepting subsidies or onerous regulations, creating barriers to entry that no one can compete against them. You know what I mean? It's the same thing, but people don't equate unions are for unions like corporations are for corporations, but people can't put that together. It's like these anonymous workers that are being harmed by unions restricting output, restricting the amount of people that are hired harms people that you'll never hear about. Those people can't form a union, and it's ridiculous. So when people are calling Trump a fascist, it's like you don't know. I'm like, you cannot like Trump. That's totally fine. There's a lot of things, and I'll post about things that he does that are just not free market ideas. But I'm not going to say that's crazy to say he's a fascist. And if you do, you don't know history, you don't know economics, and you don't know politics. I'm sorry, you don't. Go ahead.
Well, I've seen it kind of drives me nuts, and this happens with every politician, whether it's on the left or the right. Any political figure in the United States, I think it kind of, maybe it's because I'm young, but I think I saw it start with Bush, and it's happened with Obama, now it's happening with Trump, where they're getting called fascists. They have these comparisons to Hitler, and I'm like, if you read anything about history, George W. Bush, as much as I didn't like him, was not Hitler. Come on, these comparisons don't make any sense.
What's that, Matt?
I said I think Hitler was Hitler.
Yeah. No, it is just funny because they think that that just because you don't like it, it has to be fascism. That, I don't like this, I disagree, fascism. And then they're doing exactly what fascists do. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to, here's another thing with Trump. And look, the only reason I'm defending him is because so many people, so many of these intellectuals and pundits despise Donald Trump. If everybody loved him, I'd be hammering on him on his protectionism, on his the protectionism certainly within his tax policy, how he's attacking Ted Cruz and Rand Paul from the left, how he's circling the wagons on ethanol, pandering to agribusiness. There's a lot of things to nail him on that he's doing that are antithetical to why people like him. But just coming out and going, well, he's a fascist is doing exactly what people claim he's doing, saying things without offering any backup arguments, like I'm going to make America great again, and then have no argument on how to do it. People do that to Donald Trump. Well, come up with an argument. You know what I mean?
Just like Donald Trump, they repeat it over and over again.
Right.
And apparently that's what makes it true. Just like if Donald Trump says he's going to make America great again, as long as he repeats that enough times, it must be true.
Right, exactly.
We're also going to start winning again.
So so a lot of that was really starting to bother me, like this fascist point. And no, Obama's not a fascist, but the left is far more totalitarian, as we have seen on college campuses. Trust me, I know in my college, for me to have a dissenting opinion, I'm targeted. I am targeted. I'm despised by other students. That's totalitarianism, and that comes from the left. I don't see Donald Trump saying don't oppose me, or you can't. You know what I mean? I'm not really following the guy that intensely, but it seems that the media, the left, are really the left, obviously, but the GOP establishment are parroting these points, and it seems like these libertarians that are anti-establishment are parroting just exactly what the establishment's parroting. I don't know. I feel like I'm anti-establishment. Go ahead, Matt.
I'm despised by other students too for my opinions, but all the people I'm despised by are the kinds of people I would never want to be friends with. So
right.
I don't really think it matters, to be honest. Like,
I don't think it matters. But what does matter is social ostracism, insofar as you think differently, and that they don't want to engage you on the arguments and logic and reason. And that gets to my next. Go ahead.
Well, the problem with that, from even a liberal perspective, is like, if they're going to shut down every minority opinion, well, gay marriage was minority opinion 20 years ago. They would have shut that down by that mode of thinking, and that would have never turned into anything. So it could also thwart ideas they might end up liking.
Right.
That kind of mentality, at least.
What if there were safe spaces for conservative Christians 20 years ago when it was talking about gay marriage, and you couldn't have a speaker come to your college campus and say, hey, I want to legalize gay marriage, because that would just be too emotionally traumatizing to the conservative students.
Right.
I think these liberals today would think that's ridiculous, but yet they want to censor anybody that disagrees with them, and they need a safe space, and this person's racist, and they can't have any dissenting viewpoint whatsoever. But if this would have been the case, like you said, 40 years ago, 20 years ago, they would have been singing an entirely different tune. They'd be protesting out on the streets. But now the people protesting this are racist, crazy people. Right.
And, and as a student of political science and in academia, the whole, and Unbiased America gets this charge a lot, I'm sure you guys do too, is that, oh, you're not biased, you're biased. Or, because we hold largely libertarian conservative principles, that somehow that's bias. Well, I always say the truth isn't biased. You know what I mean? But the whole premise of the left, of the socialist Marxist left, is that their first and their undergirding philosophy is that there is no truth. Okay? So if you say and you start at there is no truth, you've already thrown logic, reason out the window, because logic and reason are both there, obviously, to discern the truth. I mean, you're throwing epistemology out the window, you've thrown metaphysics out the window, you've thrown teleology out the window, and now you're saying that anything I say can be true. And that these things...
what you say?
Go ahead.
You know what you say next time, or dude, next time someone says there is no truth? How many fingers am I holding up? How about now?
No, I mean, it's like there is so...
You can't refute that.
This is the insanity of the left, and that's what undergirds their philosophical position. So when people say you're biased to the right, no, I think that there's an objective truth, and I know that I can reach that through logic, reason, and science, through the scientific method. I understand that gravity exists. Just because if there's 10 people that exist and 9 of them say there isn't gravity, and I'm the only person saying there's gravity, that doesn't change the fact of the matter. That these people, science. It's only science when it works in their favor. You see? And then
Well,
you're unbiased if you adhere to the truth, and the truth tends to be more on the libertarian conservative side, where libertarianism or classical liberalism, broadly speaking, isn't an ideology, but it's a philosophy that's rooted in reason and logic, and history, and things that we know that work in reality, and it comes from the standpoint of we know humans are fallible, where the left is saying that it's the Rousseauian notion of man is born free but is everywhere in chains. And they're saying there's institutions like capitalism that is the reason why individuals cannot be perfected, that capitalism is this veneer, is this social construct that in the United States of America that the white supremacists literally use to steal the labor of non-whites. And that
Everything is a social construct.
that's correct. They're saying that capitalism
Yeah.
itself as an institution, or all our other institutions, are there to subjugate non-whites in the United States of America. And that you need that instead of using and seriously, they're saying that this is a racist struggle, and that you should extrapolate that struggle into a class struggle, and then you need what the proletariat needs to do. And I put this, and this is in academia. I'm not kidding, that the proletariat needs to rise up and strip the existing system of capitalism. They need to strip it of that to get to the reality, and the reality is Marxism. I am not kidding. The reality is everyone owns everything, and there's a utopia, and it's that these white supremacists are keeping it from these people. This is this is insane. This is so unbelievably insane. Go ahead.
I always wonder how that's going to happen. Like, even if, let's say, these retarded communists kill all the rich people, are they really going to pretend any communists would actually know how to liquidate their assets and redistribute? They have no idea how any of that works. They don't understand the logistics of how Marxism.
Because there is no truth, Matt. You're assuming that there is actual ways. This is what I mean. You're assuming there's actual ways. Look, this is based on the failure of Marxism. That Marxism in reality, communism and socialism can't work. So what do you do when your ideology, something that you're wedded to, this vision that you're wedded to, doesn't work?
What drives me the most nuts about that claim, if there's no truth, isn't that a truth claim within itself?
That's precisely correct.
So why am I going to believe
stop
you?
thinking. Stop thinking, Mike. You've really ruined it. No, I mean this is the thing. This is like Thomas Aquinas. If you read the Summa Theologica, that's the first thing he says. If there is no truth, you've just made a truth claim. Therefore, truth is self-evident. You can't. You can't say there is no truth and then that's true. You just can't. So you've just refuted your own position already from your own claim, that the premises is in fact false, and you can't argue a false premises. So I don't, it's just this is the insanity of the left, and this is what all undergirds it. And they never want to talk about what undergirds it, and that's why on college campuses they need to shut off debate. I actually had one teacher say, when I was engaging another student in a debate, and I said, "Well, what's your proof?" She was talking about how people think, and I said, "Okay, so are you a psychologist?" "No." And I said, well, then how are you assuming how people think? "Oh, my friend thinks this way." And I said, that's fine that your friend does. Do you have any proof that people in the aggregate think that way? "Oh, you know." Well, I'm like, well, you just said something without a shred of evidence. And the teacher said, "Oh, don't debate with Will. You'll never win with Will because he drags things into facts." And I was dumbfounded. I was literally dumbfounded as to how else can you debate.
Yeah.
I thought of Mike right away because I know how Mike is. He's very structural and logical in his debate, and it's like, these are the facts. What's wrong with you? And you know what I mean? And I was like, God, I wish Mike was here to hear this. You know what I mean? But this is literally what we're up against. Do you see why it's so hard to win?
Facts are racist.
That's precisely it. No, you laugh, and we laugh at this as it's satirical. But that is true. That is what they think.
That's what ableists too.
Right, and if you disagree, you're a racist. I always say it's like the 13th to 14th century. You're a heretic.
Yeah.
Cut off debate, heretic. That's what it is. That's the new term to cut off debate. Is that you must be a racist, and it's really firing me up. You know what I mean? And this is what I don't think we understand precisely what we're up against. That they don't care, Mike, about how many facts or your logic or reason. Literally, postmodernism, which stems from Marxism, which is a Michael Foucault, who was a Marxist, big-time Marxist, is that it's the end of reason and rationale. Is that modernism is the era of rationality. That's the era of classical liberalism and our founders. And that postmodernism is the end of reason and rationale, that you cannot discern truth through reason and rationale. This is, I mean, I don't know if this is, to me, this is so shocking.
I read an article on Salon earlier today, and it was about ending the 500-year tirade of the white man, basically.
That's it. That's postmodernism.
Mike,
Go ahead.
He wrote that. He published that through the internet, which was invented by a white man, on computers, which were invented by a white man, which had to rely on harnessable electricity, which was invented by a white man, and it was posted on Facebook, which was invented by a white man.
The idea that
it's funny.
Without us, there was no article.
Do you see why they create those divisions, though? Do you see why they create this white, black?
Yeah.
They need those class divisions, and then what they do is this Ta-Nehisi Coates, this kook, this moron. Okay, in this book, he tries to say, he's an absolute.
I see Toni Morrison reviewed it, so I imagine it's shit.
Oh, it's awful. I mean, this book is full of nonsense that not a single solitary shred of actual evidence. I went through on Amazon to read the comments, and people were like, "Oh, I love the book," but it didn't give a lot of evidence, or they would say it just seemed like stories, and he didn't add a lot of real world stuff. And I'm thinking, are you leftist stupid? To him, the truth is a story. Yeah. To him, it's just storytelling and narratives, and that's what he creates. And what he tries to do is, it's a Marxist book. This is a communist book, extrapolating blackness into a struggle, a class struggle. And he's trying to make the proletariat class needs to rise up against the capitalist class. That's exactly what this book is about. And the left isn't ashamed to admit it. I got an A on my test talking about this book. Those same things. They're not
I think it's and going back to this article, because it's kind of on the same subject, one of the arguments that he brings up is that in the current American society, and especially white society, we've been brainwashed since an early age, and therefore we can't see the problem. We just can't see it. So when we argue against it, we just don't understand. And I think, well, what a convenient way to win an argument.
That's correct.
I can just tell you that you don't understand because you can't see it, and therefore I win automatically. That's basically how they argue.
You've nailed it, because their whole philosophy... Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
There's this feminist on YouTube named Anita Sarkeesian, and she's like that lawyer who thinks video games cause violence, but she thinks they cause sexism, and she was like, the more you think you can't be affected, the more you're likely to be affected. But she herself is a gamer. So couldn't the argument also apply to her, that she herself will become sexist from these things? Like, it's just a complete circular argument. It's a cop-out.
Wait, explain that again, Matt.
So Mike was saying, like, the left always argues, like, well, you just don't understand because of your position. And, like, there was this feminist on YouTube saying, which is something like sexism in video games. And obviously her critics say, well, no, there's no evidence that playing video games will make you more sexist. And her response was, well, the more you think you're not affected, the more likely you are to be affected. So, I don't know, it's just a complete circular argument. And
no, that's what they do.
Someone could say, well, aren't you going to become sexist? And if she denies it, then she is. So, I don't know.
Again, it's back to what Mike talked about. There is no truth, but then you make a truth claim. Well, where are you getting that? They reduce truth to stories, and like Mike said, it's a really convenient way to argue. I've called postmodernism from the beginning the philosophy of convenience. That anytime you're in an argument, you're wrong. There is no truth. You're talking from an era like facts. You're using facts, so you don't understand that truth is a narrative that I made up. Mm-hmm. That this is what we see through the multiculturalist standpoint. This is what we see through affirmative action. They don't care that affirmative action actually harms the black community. They don't care. What they care about is.
I was told, like, I don't know. Like, I remember, I think, like, in response to the University of Missouri thing, there was like a great article in the Atlantic about like how absurd all the protests are, and so like idiot I went to high school with posted the article, had her own write-up critiquing it, and was like, how dare you call into question the experiences of marginalized students? And it's like, well, I care about how these people's lives are on aggregate. Who gives a shit about one or two out of millions? Like, it tells you nothing. Some people don't have a bad experience in life, but I mean everyone is in a certain group.
And it's funny that if you bring up the facts and show that it's harming them, they care more because they have a story behind theirs. This is what it all is. It's all a matter of stories. And you see this in the news, and you see this with police brutality police brutality in what was I going to say? certain, what do you call that?
I don't know.
Examples. There's certain examples, certainly, of police brutality. But what they do is they try to turn that into narratives that, that the police are out to kill blacks, and sometimes this happens. It also happens to whites. You'll never hear about that because it doesn't fit a narrative.
And whites are more likely to be killed by police than blacks are. Once you adjust for the amount of violent crimes committed by
But
blacks.
when you say that doesn't matter because that's not a story. Stories and narratives are what that's what the truth is. And if you don't get that story or narrative, you don't know what you're talking about. And I mean, this is what I learned in class, and I understand philosophy. I've studied philosophy. I'm so unbelievably confused by it. But I'm saying, well, how do you know that the police are out to get blacks, and you're saying it a definitive statement, and there is no truth? Isn't that just another social construct that needs to be deconstructed? They're deconstructionists, and these things need to be deconstructed, just not their own claims.
I think progressivism is a social construct.
No,
let's just back up a second. And I always thought this was hilarious. The left doesn't trust the police. The police are after blacks, and apparently all police are racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And out to kill black people. So shouldn't we want black people to have as many weapons and ammunition as possible to defend themselves from, the fascist police forces of the United States? But no, only police should be trusted with guns.
Right.
So which one is it? I don't understand that.
Malcolm X would be disgusted by that. Absolutely disgusted by that whole. You know what I mean? Here's a guy that fought for gun rights, and to a certain degree fought for individual rights. I mean, not to the degree that Martin Luther King did, but he would be like a lot of these. And he's a postmodernist, yes. Malcolm X is a postmodernist, but when it was convenient for him to understand that gun ownership, when it was convenient, that's okay at that point, you see? If certain things like civil liberties will fit into their narrative and they'll, okay. You know what I mean? We do it on principle. Like, it's on principle. These are one of your rights. To me, it's a metaphysical claim that, you have this right to life, liberty, and property. Off of that stems certain things. That's where you have these civil liberties, that you're self-sovereign. The state can't stop you from saying most things. But they just say it if it goes along with, we always talk about narratives, and the race is a narrative to them. Look, there's nothing that separates me from anyone with a different skin pigmentation, just other than narratives and what the media is willing to portray. You know what I mean? And incentives created by government. And a lot of them perverse incentives. You know what I mean? We see this with, what they'll do is, and we've talked about this on the show, in the drug war and what it's done to these communities. And I say, yeah, the drug war has harmed the community insofar as the welfare state had existed prior. And that the welfare state affected the black community more so because they were the poorest at the time. And they created these perverse incentives that broke down the family structure. And the only way that these young black men had to turn to was gang life. And the only way they figured that they could make money is through selling drugs. And you hear a lot of this, I had no other choice. Of course you have a choice. We live in the United States of America. You have a choice. I mean, I get that you grew up and you didn't have, without a family structure, and most certainly for a young man not having a father, you could most definitely feel that way. There is no doubt about it.
If these people are selling drugs because they don't have any choice, then how can liberals support legalizing drugs? Because wouldn't they no longer have that choice because it's just going to be legalized?
Right, I know.
You can't sell them. I mean, I think it should be legal. You can't sell on the street if it's legal. So
right, I'm just saying that the perverse effects of the welfare state. Before the welfare state, the drug trade wasn't that big of a problem. The booze trade, when they outlawed the booze prohibition, was a problem because it created a lucrative industry. But the drug war wasn't a problem until you had the welfare state that created perverse incentives that broke down families among the poorest people. And that's not just black people, but that's a majority of white people, certainly in Appalachia, that did the same exact thing. But if you look at the numbers in aggregate, the numbers far more affected the black community. And look, the state has a lot to do with segregating blacks and creating these segregated communities, which I write on extensively, and lowering the cost of discrimination within a capitalist system. And we talk about that an awful lot, that capitalism as an institution, and that they hate, institutions are bad, but capitalism harnesses and mitigates, the worst effects, the flaws of mankind. If you want to be discriminatory, that's going to come at a cost in a capitalist system. Right?
Yeah, and it's funny you bring that up. We all know that The Onion, which is sometimes hilarious, but definitely a liberal talking website, they wrote an article, I think it was about a week ago, and they were jokingly saying that, corporations have decided to hire more women so that they can pay them 77
Right.
cents on the dollar. And while they were trying to be funny, what I was attempting to point out in the comments that no one would believe me was, if this was actually the case, then that is exactly what corporations would be doing, would be
Right.
hiring women and saving all this money. But nobody that writes at The Onion apparently gets this. They were trying to be funny, but they were actually bringing up a point that we've brought up several times. If it was really cheaper to hire women, corporations would be taking advantage of this across the board.
That's what I want to get into too, is this mentality of the left and how hypocritical and contradictory they are. And let's talk about Carl or Robert Gibson, the head of U.S. Uncut. And Mike and I saw a post, and I mean, I reacted immediately, and I believe it was on. He went to a restaurant, and I think did you see this, Matt? He went to a restaurant.
No,
and he saw a Bernie Sanders sticker on their register. This is one instance. I'm going to get to another.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, and he saw a Donald Trump sticker and said he got up and left and said, "I'm not going to spend any money there." You know what I mean?
He doesn't support racism.
Okay.
Now, and then I think Mike commented exactly what I was going to comment. So the free market, then, right? You know what I mean? Here's a guy that wants to force businesses to serve people that they don't agree with, or pay employees a price that he has no business in, and then says, "Oh, I want to leave and I don't want to pay them because I don't agree." It's okay for him to do it, but it's not okay for wealth creators to do it. You see? Like, and then a second instance was, "I can't wait. I'm so tired of landlords and renting. I can't wait to own my own home." I'm reading it like, here's a guy advocating for property rights, but then hates property rights. What a nut! I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And I almost said, so the free market then, right? You know what I mean? Like, why did somebody produce your home in the first place? You know what I mean? Here's a guy like, "Oh, I want to own my own home." So you're going to buy it for somebody that obviously created it in the pursuit of these horrible profits. Go somewhere where there are no profits and people think profits are somehow like this thing that appear out of thin air. Without profits, there is no allocation of resources. Nobody does anything. You have nothing. So profits don't just exist as a reward, they exist as a means to allocate scarce resources with alternative uses.
I just kind of think it's funny that he thinks that he should be able to own property. Isn't that discriminatory?
That's what I said. Who said you can? Why can't you just? The government should assign you a house and then assign those rooms to other people. Who are you to say you should own your own home and keep people off of it? Can I come in there? I eat cereal with melted cheese. Am I allowed in your house?
Basically, what Carl advocates is for the government to be the overall landlord of society. However, he's sick of that.
Right.
But that's what he wants. He wants government to control ownership of all property, but he wants to own his own home. So if he's sick of landlords, why does he want a giant landlord controlling everybody?
The guy is a kook, and I mean, I like him. He's a nice guy, but you're just so philosophically wrong and deluded. And this is what I mean. Once you really get a full-on grasp of what we're up against, you're never going to change these ideologues. If you believe there is no truth, that's what you're going to start at. So I mean, we really need to focus on people that understand. And I think most people understand that truth exists. I mean, most of us are in the business world, and Mike, you're starting your own business. You understand that there are things you cannot do, otherwise your business is going to close. And there are things that work, and your business stays open. And if you screw up or you have a bad idea, you go out of business. Bad ideas can live on in academia and among intellectuals. Go ahead.
Speaking of truth, the other day the Sandra Bland verdict was in, and they found there was no wrongdoing in her death. And if there was evidence of wrongdoing, the left would hold it up as proof of racism. We have a legal decision proving it, but the opposite happened, and now that's proof that the system is racist.
Right.
So I just don't understand how you win.
You don't.
I don't. Yeah.
You don't win, and I think that back to the fascist thing. I think that people think that because fascists like Mussolini kind of kicked out the socialists, Hitler to the same, that they think that somehow it's opposed to socialism. You know what I mean? Like, I think that just Mussolini himself was concerned about like a Bolshevik revolution, that they would take over the government. They were a threat to his power, not necessarily that it was and he understood that if they were to allocate the resources that way, that he wouldn't become as powerful as he needed to. And Hitler understood that with the fall of the Weimar Republic, that this is just socialism was a failure. I mean, and that, what was it? Germany was starting to institute that in the 1860s under Otto von Bismarck. They had these welfare system and this allocation of resources, and they have 50, 60 years of it. And what did they have in 1933? 1,000% inflation, just print money. That solves the you know what I mean? So they see that as those opposing forces of, yes, people should own things, and that's how we should allocate resources, as opposed to the government should own it. And then the means by which, the fascists use to control those resources. And you've seen this in Latin America, that these, what they'll do is they'll relinquish to the free market when their power is threatened. That, I might get overthrown here. I need to get, because the people, you have these opposition forces and you have the incumbent forces. And once the opposition forces start to push back the incumbency, they're like, wait, we'll go free market. So then people's standard of living improves. And then all of a sudden the opposition starts to die out. You know what I mean? They're not pushing as much. They're like, things are getting better. Our standard of living's getting better. This is great. And then what the person does is they're like, I have a ton of money now, making revenue. You know what I mean? I'm going to use this revenue to win office again. And then it happens again, and this has happened time and time again in Latin American countries. They'll push to freer markets, and then what people do? They blame the free market.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me, and it doesn't matter what country you study there. After what they call in Latin American political science the critical juncture, which was 1929, the market crash, or 1930 more specifically. It wasn't until June 1930 that you really had it. The market started to die. 29 was the crash. But you really saw governments take over public unions and institute these fascist systems where that they can maintain control. And the only way to overthrow them was a military coup, most of the time. The only time it was different was in Chile, when Pinochet understood that his power was threatened by his massive amounts of corporatism, and he started to relinquish the free market. Eventually, the market flourished. And he left quietly in 1998. I mean, here's a guy that was committing atrocities. He was some free market maven. Of course he was. He was a fascist. He's a fascist dictator.
It's weird how Naomi Klein forgot to put that part in her book.
Oh, she's this woman.
Yeah,
I mean,
she's terrible.
What a liar she is. Yeah. How does anyone How does she have credibility, though, Matt? Can you riddle me that?
I don't know. I mean, on her book it says, she has like a doctorate or an honorary doctorate from I think it was like LSD or something. But the only degree she actually has, an earned degree, is like a BA in English. So.
Are you kidding me?
No, I think she only has an undergrad in English. It's like English and philosophy or something. Yeah, but she has no economics background at all.
That goes back to narratives. She's a storyteller, and that's what she does, is tell stories. Whether the truth doesn't matter. Milton Friedman's a bad guy, and he went down there and he made Pinochet. Because of the Chicago Boys somehow, which was in 1973. The Chicago Boys were imploring Pinochet to institute these reforms, which he did. He was terrified to do until 75, when the opposition forces were pushing back, and he's like, let me free up the markets. You know what I mean?
Her use of statistics, it was pretty. I mean, her use of statistics in the book too is pretty god awful. Like, she was talking about it, like, the year after, the Chicago school policies went into effect in Chile. She was like, inflation was 300% a year. So I'm like, all right, so what was it the year before that? And it was like 500%.
Exactly.
And I looked like a few years in the future, and like within 5 years, it was down to 30%. And it was declining every single year after.
In the early 80s, they were restricting the monetary supply, and everyone's, look at how terrible. Look at how terrible it's doing. Well, they're restricting the money supply. There's a hangover after that massive inflation. It's like what you think these policies taking effect like overnight? Like, what people's money is becoming more valuable. Do you think they're going to invest it or keep it in the bank? Like, what do you think they're going to do? This happened in the United States too. I mean, people were bashing Reagan the first 3 years until 1983. Like, this free market economics don't work. It was his massive tax cuts that did it, and people aren't like Volcker and him working together are restricting the M1 supply, and people think like, this is horrible. But did you look at the 70s, the stagflation? It was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't get that there's trade-offs and consequences to things. That, if you just have an easy money supply, it'll always work out, and there's going to be no negative consequences, as if there's wealth in paper money. It's a basic economic knowledge to understand that that's lunacy.
Well, the argument I'm hearing today, now after the interest rate hike recently, is that if there's no inflation, then there's no reason to raise interest rates. That's the argument I'm getting now.
Because the only thing that dictates inflation is interest rates. There's no. Well, first of all, the economy is struggling. There's no velocity of money. It's MV equals PQ. Let's say you have easy money, but nobody's loaning it. There's no transactions. There's no velocity, meaning people aren't transacting. There's not a lot going on. Banks primarily sitting on cash. That money's not being interjected into the economy. Therefore, you're not going to have any inflation. It's going to be a point where you have an economy that's actually humming along, and you're just interjecting cash, and it keeps going in. It keeps going into the economy through transactions. I mean, banks were sitting on a lot of money for a long time because they were nervous about loaning out money, certainly right after the crash. So the whole point of raising interest rates is to encourage saving, like the proper, efficient allocation of resources. We see misallocation everywhere in a bloated stock market. You see it too at the housing market, which went right back to subsidizing loans not that long ago. I mean, you've seen the same thing. The housing prices are right back to where they were. You know? So, we need to have... People aren't saving their money. I've seen conflicting studies that with the lower gas prices, people are saving it. I see studies that say they're not. But...
Most of what I've seen is they're paying down debt, so...
Yeah, I've seen the opposite of that. I've seen people say that they're spending it and not... So it's like, who can you believe at this point? I've seen two things.
I mean, it could just be changing. We've had low prices for like a year. Maybe the first few months they're doing something with it. The next few they're doing something else. Who knows?
Right.
Well, this goes back to what Matt was saying, that we've had low gas prices for how long? Maybe a year or so. You can't study the effects of what is actually happening. What are people actually doing with this money? Mm-hmm. We're not going to know that until 5-10 years down the road. What actually happened to this money? But people think that you can take, and this happens, I saw this, there was a minimum wage study done in San Diego after San Diego, or was it San Jose, raised their minimum wage. People said, well, there was no drop-off in hiring. It actually rose. Well, hiring was already on the rise in San Jose before that. We're not going to know what happened, what the effects were hiring on that minimum wage hike until 5 years from now. People think that the day after it happens, you're going to see exactly the results of the policy. That's not how this works. And by the time that we do get good results, we have someone that comes in 5 years later says, hey, this didn't work, or this did work, let me change it for you, but we don't even know the truth yet.
Yeah, I don't think Seattle's minimum wage or the $15 one has even gone into effect, and people are already trying to point to successes and failures with it when it hasn't even phased in.
Yeah, and this goes both ways. I've seen people talk about the failures in Seattle, and they're talking about
the successes.
The only rational argument you can make there is that employers are already scaling down hiring in anticipation for the hire. But even that's iffy.
Well, why doesn't the government, if they're going to make it 15, make it 15 tomorrow? Why aren't they doing that? I mean, even these leftists understand they have to phase it in.
It's as if they understand that it costs jobs.
Right. They do know that it costs jobs. They don't care. Obviously, they're going to phase it in so employees know not to hire someone else, that they restrict hiring. Like that's $15 comes at the cost of somebody. It's just like a union. Okay, that's what it is. It's a wage enacted by government that is forced on businesses. So unions do the same thing. That now this is going to come at the expense of people that are not hired, and you have seen small businesses close that can't stay open that pay that. So what you're going to see are these inconsequential businesses with no political power close, and you're going to see these larger corporations that can absorb it, that have a bigger market, not hire like they would hire before. And no one ever talks about the loss of human capital, that these people gaining entry-level work are able to acquire human capital, accumulate it, and be paid more over time. Instead, what they're going to do is find welfare a more lucrative position. You're going to see these welfare rolls tick up, and you're going to see how, you know what I mean, and you're going to see, less people hired. That's inevitable. That is inevitable.
The irony is, and it always makes me laugh, is that the evil big corporations, and of course everybody on the left hates the evil big corporations,
right,
are usually the biggest and most vocal supporters of raising the minimum wage. And they know that that's because they can squeeze out their smaller competition.
That's correct.
But when a corporation like, let's say, McDonald's, and McDonald's is always a pariah, and so is Walmart, but when they come out in support of a minimum wage, the left trumpets these people. Like, hey, look, this corporation says the minimum wage is good, and they want it. But just 2 days ago, they might have been talking about how evil and how selfish this corporation was. So why can't they connect the dots? Well, maybe this corporation is supporting the minimum wage due to nefarious intent.
You're talking about facts, Mike. That's why.
Yeah, whenever Walmart calls for a higher minimum wage, it's always a number above the current minimum wage, but below the average Walmart wage. So it's never going to affect them. Yeah.
It's just this fundamental misunderstanding of economics that is just, it's frightening. It really is. And again, narratives and storytelling and feelings, that's literally what it is, over the truth.
So support local businesses, even though local businesses are the most harmed by your policies.
Right. And then it's funny, I see these local businesses say, oh, spend at my place and don't go to Walmart. I see these signs in California, and it's like, well, what are you going to do what do I owe you? Like, I got to go in, I'm poor. I'm going to go into your place and pay more because you have a business than go to Walmart? Like, what do you, I have to subsidize you? It's like, just ask for a subsidy. Please subsidize my business. I can't compete. Please come in here.
I've made that argument many times. I've said Walmart's done more to help poor people through low prices than any minimum wage hike could ever dream of helping poor people.
That's right.
But you can't bring that up.
No, it's like it's always
wages, which are a price, are somehow different than prices for your cereal.
Right. Though they don't see how prices work to allocate resources. They can't figure that out. That they don't. I think to a point they don't think labor is a resource. They don't think labor is a resource, and they don't think wages are a price, even though both of those are exactly what that is. That supply and demand, well, doesn't exist anyway, but it certainly doesn't exist for labor.
Not at all. No.
So you can't have if you have a price floor, you know what I mean, that you can't have a surplus, and if you have a price ceiling, you can't have if you have a price ceiling, you can't have a surplus, and if you have a price floor, you can't have a shortage. So
well, my favorite argument is the one that it's not going to cost jobs because poor people spend all their money, and it's like, okay, McDonald's workers making an extra $1.50 an hour, that's what's going to save our economy. Like,
yeah, no, yeah, I mean, they do spend more, sure, but the thing is that you can go and spend more at a college.
But it's just like I look at the stats. It's like it was a Wall Street Journal piece. Like if you rose the minimum wage, I think it was like $9.25 an hour. It would boost annual consumer spending by like $5 billion. So it's like, what's our economy? $18 trillion. So $5 billion at $18 trillion.
Like you brought up, there is no cost, you see, to entry-level work. There is no. You should automatically be paid like what a baseball player makes, just right out of the gate. They don't understand that the alternative is going to a college and paying them, as opposed to being paid.
Yeah.
For entry-level work and gaining these. Sure, you're going to pay more. You're going to, your marginal utility of your dollar is a lot more than it is for anyone else, no doubt. But I'm $60,000 in debt at college. This is what I had to, I'm paying actually to get skills, and I'll end up still entry level. These people have been, they're working. Some of these people that work at McDonald's start as a cashier, they end up as a manager, and they're doing quite well. If you stick with it, or they move on to a different industry, or they use it to work through school, or it's a second job for extra money to buy Christmas gifts. I don't know. But these, why do they take out the right of people to choose? They think that, they're living off of this. No, they're not. A lot of them aren't. Good God.
Well, the worst thing about it is there's so many laws that are set up to help people that actually hurt people. And this is especially true of people that work at McDonald's. For instance, Obamacare. We want any corporation that has more than 50 employees like McDonald's has to offer their employees health insurance. And so if you have a full-time worker, then you have to offer that person health insurance. So what happens is corporations like McDonald's, knowing that that's prohibitively expensive to have full-time workers, cut their hours back. So now these people that may have been working 40 hours a week and making an extra $400 a month are only working 30 hours a week and not having health insurance or the extra $400 a month. So all these laws that are set up to help these people always do immeasurable harm to them. And they can't work. They either can't get hired or they can't make enough money to afford their rent, and they can never move up the ladder. They're just stuck.
Yep. Indeed. It's really bad. It's just annoying. And I don't see a lot of people. I don't see a lot of. Here's another thing. I don't see conservatives or libertarians. I do sometimes bring up these points, but really, like, conservatives mainly focus on the breakdown of the family, and yeah, that's a big deal. But let's talk about, like, a lot of the economics of it too, and talk about how, a lot of these things, like the government really does protect a lot of these industries and markets that harm people. You know what I mean? And that these onerous regulations, lower the costs of discriminating, and that is perpetuating racial disparities. I don't see a lot of that. Maybe because they think it's not entertaining, to have on television. But I mean, Bill O'Reilly's not entertaining. I mean, he just sounds stupid. So maybe it's me. I don't know. If I got to hear that guy say another word, I'm going to gouge my own eyes out. For sure.
Most of the policies that are disproportionately affecting minorities are coming from the left that swears by helping minorities. That's the biggest problem I see. We can talk about these issues all we want. The left is going to talk about, well, the black community's been affected, the black community's poor, we have to help the black community. And the policies they pass are the actual policies that are holding these people back. They're disproportionately impacting them.
So when they say that, it's really code for helping themselves, like the Democrat Party and their own political party, as opposed to actually helping anyone. And this is where I always say that the left has nefarious intentions. I think that they're intended to, what their intention is to create these racial divisions, obviously, and these enclaves of people that depend on government and that will vote for them perpetually, creating perpetual voting classes. And that's precisely what they're doing. And it's not out of altruism. It's not because they care. It's because they like power. And it's easy to sell a check. It's tangible. You know what I mean? Vote for me. We'll take from these evil rich people that are stealing your labor, and we'll give it back to you. You see what I mean? It's like they're just getting what they're deserved. So, I mean, this comes up through academia. We see it now with these uprisings on campuses. I need my safe space, Black Lives Matter movement. That this evil white, they'll rarely come out and say it, though, that this is a white supremacist construct and system and institution, and it needs to be broken down, and that's what they're doing, and they're out to get the big evil white male. I mean, go ahead.
I find it ironic that the people that are saying that black people should be able to have their accomplishments based on their own merit and not be given a crutch, such as I can't even think, the college program.
Affirmative action?
Yeah, affirmative action. Yeah, I couldn't think of that for some reason. But yeah, these are the people that are saying black people need a crutch. Right. Yeah, we're saying you can't do it on your own. We're going to help you because you're too stupid, and if you don't have a 3.5, we're going to give that to you as if you had it, so that we're going to give you this crutch. You're too stupid to do it on your own. But we're not the racists here. Mm-hmm. The people that want you to be able to do it on your merit, want you to be able to prove yourself and be equal, they're the racists. We think you're too stupid. We're not the racist ones.
Right. It's fascinating.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it really is.
But the whole point of their intentions, okay, like you said, I think are nefarious. But let's say that their intentions are good. The actual results, the effects are, well, let's lower the bar for admission to Harvard because of your skin pigmentation. And then when you can't make it and you fail out or drop out, that's not our problem. Let's set you up for failure because of your skin pigmentation, because it makes some white elitist feel good and make them feel like they're not a racist.
And then despite those policies, if anyone thinks you're only there because of your skin color, that's a microaggression.
Right.
We're full of microaggressions. Yeah, that's it. Like, and if this person can't cut it at Harvard, and you say that, well, maybe they would have been better off at Massachusetts University. Well, that's racist. Well, they would have been better off. If you can't cut it at Harvard, you could have gotten a degree from a lower tier school and had a better life. But now you dropped out of college, you accumulated debt, you lowered your GPA. Now your life is worse off because they lowered the standards to let you in. When you could have went to maybe not as great a school, but still a good school,
would have succeeded.
Got your degree, you would have succeeded, and you could be off on whatever life track that you should have been on.
But when white people aren't admitted because they don't meet the standards, that's not racism because you're white.
That's fair.
And
That's
when a
fair.
white person can meet the standards, but there's slots given to somebody else, that's all well and good. And this is this groupthink. It's not thinking about. This is a country based on individualism. It shouldn't be based on skin pigmentation. That's ridiculous. And the only thing we've ever really focused on skin pigmentation, bad things have happened. Bad things every single time. So it really should be based on individual merit. You know, we really need to start. Individualism seems like it's really going by the wayside in this country, and everybody's trying to be part of some group with a grievance. It really is, and that groups is this thing: group rights, gay rights, black rights, as if there's no there's only one thing. It's the individual rights. Because you think you're part of a group that engages in a behavior or has a different skin pigmentation doesn't mean you're entitled to any other rights more than than any other individual. That I don't understand it. You know what I mean? And then what rights are? I have a right to health care. I have a right to your things. You know what I mean? You've earned it, though I have a right to it. What? Where is that? I don't understand. I have a right to a living wage. Well, what the hell is what's a living wage? You've just used...
You have a right to everything except the things that are in the Constitution.
Yeah. The Second Amendment, forget about that. I have a right to a living wage, though. You should pay me more. But it's really fascinating stuff. I don't, we should do our winners and losers of the week before we get anywhere else. And, Maddie, do you need a minute to think about it? Because you never know.
I do.
Go ahead.
I do never know.
Okay, so Mikey, do you need a minute?
I'm never prepared.
Well, that's your kit. Mikey, do you need a...
Well, my loser is Austin Peterson because he messaged me for $3 this week. Like, are you fucking kidding me, Austin? You have a 0% chance of winning, you retard.
That's harsh.
No,
I mean...
No, you don't ask me for money. He said at least $3. Like, beggars can't be choosers.
Well, he needs it to get his donor rolls. He needs more people in his donor roll.
I do like him, I just don't like people asking me for money. So,
okay.
I don't know.
You don't have a winner?
A winner? Me for saving $3 by not giving to Austin Peterson's campaign.
Go ahead, Mike.
Wow. That's a tough week. My winner again this week is going to be Ted Cruz. I really like what Ted Cruz is doing. He's getting a lot more donations. He's raising a lot of money. He's gaining a lot of momentum in Iowa. I think that he actually has a chance. And I started this campaign and I said, hey, I'm a Rand Paul guy. I really like Rand Paul. I like Ted Cruz too, but I'm going to trumpet Rand Paul until someone proves me otherwise. Rand Paul's campaign is over. And Ted Cruz has taken the mantle. And I think anybody that's a classical liberal or a real conservative or even with a libertarian bent, I know he's not going to pass a purity test, but I think he's shown enough now. He's got the momentum that we should all start coalescing behind Ted Cruz and start showing him some of our support because he has a legitimate chance. Loser, I don't know if I have a loser this week. My loser this week might be Bernie Sanders, just because Bernie Sanders is a loser every week. But Bernie Sanders, this week in particular, Bernie Sanders, what was it? He lost the database, the Democratic National Committee database. What was it that he lost?
Yeah, he was going into Hillary's polling data and her I think it was constituency data or something.
Yeah, he basically he was trying to cheat, and then he accused the Democratic National Committee of cheating him. But he doesn't have a chance to win anyway, so he's still a loser, and that's all that matters.
Those are good ones. Look, I agree with you on Ted Cruz. He's the winner, and this is what I dislike. I started this thing, and I was a Ted Cruz, Rand Paul guy, not because of any one of those guys. I think they're nice guys, but because of their principles. Not because of who they are, as if they're some luminary. It's not this apotheosis of Ted Cruz or Rand Paul. It's that they both adhere to constitutional principles. Rand Paul is not pure for libertarians. Rand Paul has a name, and libertarians love it. And that's why they're so far up Rand Paul's ass. It's fascinating to me to watch these people. They're as ideological as leftists.
Every debate, it's the same group of retards clapping at everything he says in the audience.
Exactly. I mean, these people are... I just cannot stand you. I'm sorry. I dislike you. And I see them attacking Ted Cruz. I constantly like attacking Ted Cruz. You're ideologues. You don't have any ideas. You don't bring anything to the table. You're better off. Please don't even follow it. You make Rand Paul look bad. You've done the impossible, which is make an awful campaign look even more awful. So please, just shut up. Shut up. I'm serious. It's just like it's so annoying. Here's a guy, Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. If you look at any rating, if you look at the Freedom Index, if you look at Conservative Review, if you look at the Heritage Foundation, they all rate Ted Cruz and Rand Paul at the top. Mike Lee is up there with them, and you got to start supporting these guys. Support the Constitution, libertarians. Your view on the Constitution is better than most, but you're not right on everything. Okay, I'm sorry. You on the gay marriage issue, you were flat wrong. On Judicial Review, you're flat wrong on a lot of cases because you can't see past your own ideology. Whether or not you like it or not, you're wrong. I'm sorry. Welcome to reality, okay? You, just like leftists, you want to ignore reality, and it pisses me off to no end. So get out from behind your ideology and look more towards truth. That rant is over.
Send your link tweets to Will, please.
Yeah, exactly. So you know who I'm talking about. I see them in my news feed all the time. I don't see conservatives attacking Rand Paul day in and day out at the expense of, at the not at not at the expense, but in Ted Cruz' benefit. I don't see them coming out. Oh, don't follow Rand. I haven't seen that at all. I've seen even conservative punditry supporting Rand and Ted Cruz from the beginning. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about. I don't know. Can you guys tell me? What am I missing here?
I will say this. The Rand Paul campaign, so horribly run. Rand Paul came out, I think it was yesterday or today, and said that he would not participate in any undercard debate if he was forced to polling numbers to go in the JV debate, they call it. Well, that's just another mistake. I wish Rand Paul was in the undercard debate last time, because you've seen these debates where you get more time, you get to stick out, you might rejuvenate the campaign.
But Mike,
his campaign.
Mike, when he was even in the big debates, he chooses to go after Trump and not express his ideas that are excellent ideas.
It's goofy to me, because the reason Rand Paul sprung up to be the front runner, and he was the front runner not that long ago, before the campaign really started, everybody thought Rand Paul might be the front runner. That was because he was all about his own ideas, and he was out there talking about his ideas. He hasn't done that. This campaign has been horribly run, and being in the undercard debate would be a way for him, with more time to speak, with more light shining on him, to get back to that message and maybe rejuvenate the campaign, but he's too stubborn to even participate in it.
And you know what's going to happen with these poll bots that follow him now? They're not going to vote if he isn't the nominee. And they don't. Oh, Ted Cruz because conservative. That's their argument. Oh, conservative. What is Rand Paul's a conservative? What do you talk? Here's a guy. He's not out trying to get the libertarian vote, which I think to a degree he was trying to maintain this attitude of libertarianism. But Ted Cruz has done it far better. If you look at him elucidate actual conservative Reaganite foreign policy, libertarians, how do you have a problem with that? He's not an isolationist. Marco Rubio, who's my loser of the week, by the way, because that guy is really starting to kill me. Here's a guy attacking conservatives from the left. Here's a guy that I do not see libertarians going after hard enough. They're going after Ted Cruz. This baffles my mind.
Because Ted Cruz isn't passing the libertarian purity test for them.
How does Rand Paul pass, Mike? How does Rand Paul pass?
Look, it's not logic. It's not logical. It's, in their mind, well, Paul has the last name. Maybe he's a little more libertarian than Ted Cruz. But here's the thing for libertarians. They're going to attack Ted Cruz because Ted Cruz is getting the support of people like you and I. So apparently, because we're more libertarian bent, we're libertarians that are supporting Ted Cruz, they have to attack him and make sure that we know. They have to enlighten us that Ted Cruz isn't libertarian enough. They have to enlighten the world that he's not libertarian enough for our support.
I like Rand Paul, and I think they're virtually the same candidate, okay? I think their ideas are on point with the Constitution. I like them both, and I would support either one. I think that it would be hard for me not to support anyone other than Rand Paul or Ted Cruz. That's it.
Definitely.
That's it. So if these libertarians, how are you? And I know, look, I'm not I'm not
But
necessarily
that's why the libertarians go after Ted Cruz. They
right.
say, "Oh, you'll support Rand Paul or Ted Cruz." Well, here's why Ted Cruz isn't good enough, and it has to be Rand Paul or bust. That's why they go after Ted Cruz.
And what's with the idea that you have to agree with the candidate on everything? Like I don't agree with all these guys on every freaking thing.
I don't agree with Rand Paul on everything.
No, neither do I. But the guy is a consistent conservative libertarian. Ted Cruz are both the most classically liberal candidates up there. They're most like the founders. There is no doubt in my mind that those, and I know the Constitution well. I know economics, and I know foreign policy in the iteration of the founders and framers and the Reagan-esque foreign policy that worked in the 80s is not about democracy building and this interventionist crap that we get from neocons now, where you have to defend yourself when you're an actual Reaganite. That Rand Paul and Cruz have to be on the defensive because if they have an actual rational foreign policy. It's like I just don't see how libertarians can't pick up on the Cruz movement here and see that Rand Paul's floundering. That yes, I love Rand Paul. God, I wish he was doing better. But man, if he can't run a freaking campaign, how the hell is he going to run the country? You know what I mean? This is what this does. This roots out the people that can't handle it, that can't hang. And Ted Cruz ran a brilliant campaign. Marco Rubio's campaign, floundering. He did a horrible job when he started to attack Ted Cruz. I have an idea. Oh, it's an anti-establishment year. Let me position myself with the establishment. What an idiot! That might be one of at this point him and Rand Paul have the worst campaigns.
We need to audit Rand Paul's campaign. Is what we need to do.
We do need to audit Rand Paul's campaign.
Do you agree with the Rubio position that here's a guy that's floundering now because he's positioned himself with an establishment and an anti-establishment year?
Rubio made the same mistake Rand Paul made in a different way.
Yes, exactly.
No matter what our opinions are on Trump, Trump came in and became the anti-establishment candidate. And Rand Paul attacked Trump. And these were potential future Rand Paul voters. They would have coalesced around Rand Paul once Trump fell out of the race inevitably. But he totally alienated them. What Rubio did was the same, but instead of alienating the anti-establishment candidates in an anti-establishment year, he decided to take the establishment side. Right. They both made mistakes misjudging what they were supposed to do in a different way.
Right. And you know what's funny is when we saw with the Donald Trump Muslim comments, you had Rand Paul actually introduce an amendment saying that we need to have a moratorium on immigration from these countries where Al Qaeda and ISIS is pervasive, and that would have stood out big time if Trump wasn't around. That would have been a big deal for conservatives everywhere. You know what I mean? But Trump overshadows him, and he's really frustrated with that. He's really frustrated that, oh, you're not, and this is what you're not a real conservative. Well, now you've just alienated conservatives. Now, and I'm not saying that, look, there's not all conservatives that are following Donald Trump. There are conservatives, but that's not all conservatives. These are people that are perhaps they don't know much about politics. They don't know a lot about the other candidates. I mean, there's still people that don't know who Ted Cruz and Rand Paul are, and they hear I'm for Donald Trump. I read his book. Or, yeah, that guy's a billionaire. He's successful. You know what I mean? Or I like that he's not a politician. Yeah. I mean, so that's kind of what you're seeing now. I think when you see a race where they're going head-to-head, I mean, a guy like Ted Cruz in a debate, I don't think Donald Trump was going to stand up well in a debate of ideas against a Ted Cruz or a Rand Paul, if you know how to debate.
No, if it was only those three on the stage and there was no establishment candidates, Trump wouldn't stand up to Cruz or Paul at all.
Right.
But the problem is that there was 9 establishment candidates on the stage, and then there was these 3 guys that are jockeying for anti-establishment support. Mm-hmm. And Paul made the mistake of not having any. He was too short-sighted. He saw Trump and Cruz come into the race, and these are the kind of people that potentially were going to steal his support. Mm-hmm. And instead of just waiting it out and trying to present his ideas and not attack these people and not alienate the people that are supporting him, he went after them at the beginning, and that was his biggest mistake.
And we're just over a month away from the Iowa caucuses, and I think if Ted Cruz, barring anything crazy, or him not riding this wave of momentum, will win the Iowa caucuses, And that's going to be huge for a guy like Ted Cruz, certainly against Donald Trump, because it's going to get his name out there. And his name's going to be out there in the press, and people are going to see, and they're going to start researching Ted Cruz. They're going to be playing clips of Ted Cruz. He's going to get a ton of press, and people are going to start hearing Ted Cruz and looking into what he did in the House and the Senate, in the Senate, and they're going to get a better picture of what the anti-establishment candidate he really is. Because at this point, they don't know what Ted, they don't know that he called McConnell a liar on the on the House floor. You know what I mean? They don't know to what degree that he's gone after these establishment candidates consistently.
I really look forward to the time, if it happens, where Ted Cruz gets on a debate stage with Hillary Clinton.
Oh, this is what I wanted in 2012. Look, Mitt Romney was the worst candidate we could possibly have. I was hoping, I was like, please, I hope Ted Cruz or Rand Paul runs. You know what I mean? Because they will clobber the left. They would have clobbered Obama on that. I would have just loved to have seen that. You know what I mean?
Right now, people are saying that Ted Cruz doesn't have a chance. They're looking at the polling, and they're saying Hillary Clinton is crushing every Republican candidate.
No one knows who Ted Cruz is. Everyone knows who
Hillary Clinton is yet. But you get Ted Cruz on a debate stage. If he's the Republican nominee, he's going to be getting all the press. Then everybody's going to know who Ted Cruz is.
Right.
You get him on a debate stage with Hillary Clinton, he is going to annihilate Hillary Clinton.
I would love it. I will love to see it. I just can't wait. And I mean, this is. But look, if you're part of the GOP, you love to see this. If you're a conservative or a libertarian, you should really be loving this, because to watch Donald Trump stir it up, he again, it's like a bait and switch. Well, not necessarily a bait and switch, but he's like, look over here while the conservatives are really debating it out. You know what I mean? Like now Ted Cruz looks more like this moderate, not that he's extreme, but he looks like really level-headed to independent voters, to voters in a general, where Donald Trump's over here, and it's kind of everyone's kind of talking about that now rather than attacking Cruz.
What libertarians and even Democrats should love about Donald Trump, regardless of his policy positions, is that he's exposed the neocons. He's completely exposed them. And whether I agree with him or not, if you're a libertarian, you have to love that about Donald Trump.
Beautiful thing. And here's a guy that said, we don't need to be invading all these countries. You know what I mean? He's in line with Cruz, Paul, on foreign policy. You know what I mean? He really is. I mean, he's saying we don't need to go. I don't want to go into Syria. Why would we do that? I mean, it's literally those three on foreign policy versus, the neocons. You know what I mean? That's really what it is. And I don't understand Marco Rubio. I think it's all positioning to him, and that's what I don't like. It's pandering to me. I know that he's not. He was against property taxes in Florida. I mean, that's kind of a if you look at, not to me, but it's a radical position. This is a guy that won opposing property, opposing property taxes, won the Speaker of the House in Florida, and that's really what launched him into the Senate. This Tea Party conservative uprising, and now here he is, positioning himself because he thinks that's going to give him the best chance to win, and I just can't take a guy that doesn't stand on principle. And I saw him talk at Freedom Fest. He gave this great free market speech, and I was skeptical. It's like, that's a great speech, but is this guy really just pandering to this libertarian? It was Freedom Fest is a largely libertarian crowd, and he was just doing just that. He was pandering.
That's Rubio in a nutshell.
And I mean, Trump too. Trump's pandering to the ethanol, the agribusiness, is pander. And here's a guy, I don't need money. And someone said, well, isn't it that Trump is funding his own campaign? Sure, he's funding his own campaign, but when you pander, you're trying to buy votes. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah, I'll get whatever you want. Just vote for me. Because he's worried about Iowa. That's why he's doing it.
Well, because if he gets that group of people behind him, that's a large chunk of people that will vote for him. It's not necessarily about the money, but about the influence. Right. Within that group of people.
Exactly. And then here it goes to the narrative that, people buy elections. You can't buy the election. You still need to get people to vote for you. And in Iowa, the way
on that, actually.
Huh?
Kevin had a great post on it, how diminishing returns on elections spending.
I was about to mention that. I was about to say I didn't know who it was. It was either Corey or Kevin that had a great post about diminishing returns on election spending.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You can't buy an election.
That's right.
I think it was either economics. It was either Freakonomics or the follow-up, but they were pointing out that the reason the candidate with the most money wins is because it's the most popular candidate that raises the most money.
Right,
They're usually popular before they raise the money, so it's the causality is the opposite.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes that then that actually makes complete sense. But
Yeah.
that's not going to fit the narrative that money controls politics in America.
Well, it was a good show, and
Yep.
we ran over because we got into some good debate here. And libertarians, I'm sorry that I'm
We get
not
a lot
sorry.
of,
Go ahead, Matt.
we're getting a lot of blowback for this one.
Yeah,
We're
I
getting
know.
a lot
Well,
of blowback.
if
for
anyone
this
ever watches it, maybe, but I don't care because libertarians, you really fire me up. I swear. For Matt Palumbo being classically liberal, also buy his books in defense of classical liberalism, which he wrote with another panelist, Corey Iacono, and as well as The Conscience of a Young Conservative. Very good books. Also,
You're no limit titles.
talk about where can they find you? You were on the Bongino show. You do a
Just
weekly
Google
spot
me.
there. Google it.
Yeah, just Google Matt Palumbo, Dan Bongino, and both. It's hosted through Conservative Review. But I think
Okay.
they're on iTunes as well, actually.
Okay. Mark Levin's the editor-in-chief at Conservative Review. Tom Woods hates Mark Levin, so libertarians, you should hate Matt more than me. And for We Are Capitalists, Mike Lee, as well as being classically liberal too, right?
Being classically liberal and We Are Capitalists, being liberal logic is now absorbed into We Are Capitalists.
Gotcha. And then myself, Will Ricciardella for Unbiased America. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week for sure. I don't know if we have a guest yet, but we'll probably arrange that. But anyway, tune in. Thank you. Bye.